I think it'd be fair to say that the team, Chris and Louise and the SRE team are very nervous about signalling a major change of direction, particularly externally, but also internally. So they've been very hot on the fact that there is no new money. Normally you can refresh your strategy when you have some more money to play with, but this is evolution, not revolution. But they acknowledge that particularly internally, and by that I include the sort of larger NIHR family, this is an important opportunity to talk about our direction. So about 2 weeks ago, we shared a kind of rollout plan with DH, and we've got feedback that it's directionally right, but what you're seeing is not signed off and hasn't got many exact dates attached to it, but it's directionally right. So the first step is today's meeting, which is brilliant timing. And we are keen to get your feedback on the document. We've already got some feedback, but I would ask if you have specific changes that you think, if there's language in the document that lands badly with you, or that's unclear, or that's duplicative, or really important things that are missing, we've probably got one more draft to go. It is near to sign off, but it's not 100% signed off. So, very interesting conversation about that fourth bullet point. Don't just look at the headlines. They are headings, and there's a limit to how much you can pack into a heading. You can't be like, 3 lines long. But also the text that sits below them. Look at the forward, look at the introduction, look at the close. I can't completely rewrite it. We're sort of at the point when it's nearly there, but it's really valuable to have this group and a fresh pair of eyes. So if the things that you think are really important, if you could tell me this week, because kind of after this week, it really becomes very hard to influence the document. Just send me an email, pick up the phone, or whatever is easiest for you, and try and be as specific as you can. And if you can propose different language, that's even better than just saying, this doesn't work, but something a bit more tangible, because we're very close to the end of the time when we can change it. Yes, and as I say, we also want feedback on the rollout plan. So the immediate next step following this meeting is to have a final draft, if you like. So that would incorporate feedback from this meeting, and probably a little bit more feedback from Chris and Louise also. So they haven't signed it off yet. And then the document will be shared with Lord O'Shaughnessy. It's a kind of big unknown whether he will want to add a preface, whether he will want to be very visibly involved in the rollout, or whether he'll just say that looks fine. So that's kind of an unknown. And Chris and Louise also plan to share the document with sort of the great and the good, so MRC and NICE and Welcome and NHS England and others, not really for comment, but more to make sure that there's nothing that jars with them or that would be sensitive in their minds. It will be sent to Strategy Board as the pre-read. I haven't yet seen an agenda for Strategy Board, so I don't know if it's just going to be ratification or discussion or any room for change, but that's taking place 18th to 19th of July. And I think pretty much by late July, the document will be completely final, based with that additional external stakeholder input. We recognise, discussed at the last strategy board, that the document by itself it needs some tools to surround it. So provisionally, what we're thinking of is some kind of video that would be probably feature Chris and Louise, but maybe other footage. Very open to ideas on this, that would sit alongside the strategy, that would go on our website, that would be shared with people. Some slides that summarise it, probably a graphic summary, like a sort of single infographic. They're not as numbery as you think of with infographics. The media boilerplate, which in my opinion has been dreadful, will be much better based on this, and that's quite an easy change. We probably need quite a comprehensive internal Q&A. I'm not thinking of that as a document that you would hand out as an FAQ, but a document for leaders to help you communicate about the strategy and answer the questions that will arise. So it's been very helpful today, just as an initial cut, to hear the questions that come to your mind. We need to align the website copy. In particular, there's a tab called About Us. And clearly, at the moment, it's got all sorts of things like themes, which I think are dead now, and old operating principles and an old boilerplate and just odd language. So that section needs to be aligned. And we may not get to this, but we need to do something about our Wikipedia entry. I don't know if anyone's looked at it recently, but it's got a large sign on it saying, do not read this. This is clearly written by the sponsoring organisation and comprises an advertisement. And it's out of date. So we're going to have to tread very carefully on how we get that one down without rewriting it. Sort of prompting others to rewrite it, I guess. And then we have the actual rollout plan. Now, these times are soft. Chris Whitty really wants to kind of get this, he wants to get this done in July. So pushing it into September, I think, is really good, but we won't be pushing it into October. So it won't be later than this, and depending on availability and dates, it may be slightly earlier. So these dates are a little bit soft. But what we've suggested is the first 2 weeks of September, each coordinating centre will roll out the plan to their respective employees. I think it's quite hard to do it, to have a single plan for everybody. There may be lots of points of overlap, which is great, but some centres are very distributed and very large, and it's hard for them to pull the whole workforce together. Some centres are very small, and they meet weekly, and it's quite easy. So there will be overlap, but I think some of it may be coordinating centre specific. And in tandem with that, we also need to bring on board the broader infrastructure. And so we're thinking that the easiest way to do that is to do 2 or 3 webinars, hopefully with Chris and Louise in person, if not through a recording, so that people can sort of dial in at the time that suits them and have a kind of hour's webinar on the strategy refresh. And then on a specific date, at the moment, provisionally the week commencing 17th of September, the document will appear on the website, along with the video and other associated materials or the sort of graphic document. There's lots of debate around this, but we are working on a new visual identity in parallel with getting approval to change our identity. And if we get that new identity, the timings are such that we could, as it were, release the strategy and the new visual identity on the same date. So the whole website won't be rebranded. It will still be the colour bar because we just don't have the time. But the actual logo, if we have a new logo, if it's approved, would then be on the website simultaneous with this document being posted. And the intention is that members of SRE, senior management team, and also centre directors then have a kind of pre-prepared list of people that we write to via email and saying we posted on new strategy and attaching a link and saying whatever they want to say. And I'm pushing for us to do, or rather Chris Whitty to do, a national media exclusive, because I know he's not very keen on media relations, but it's a perfect opportunity. If we did it as an exclusive, we'd have control over the timing, we could pick our journalist, we could shape the story to talk about where we've come from and where we're going, and do it as a kind of big sort of thought piece in one of the nationals, maybe the FT or the Guardian, and I'm not sure. We need to think about who was best. That is not approved, and then there would be some amplification via social media, so tweets and stuff on LinkedIn and so forth. So that's essentially the plan. And what would be great to get from you, and we might have sort of 5 minutes to discuss it now, but also in your groups, is thoughts about the plan. Is that the best way to roll it out? Recognising the desire to be somewhat low-key externally. And then your specific thoughts on how this should be rolled out in your coordinating centre and what you would need. I've talked about some tools that we could provide, there may be others. And then also your thoughts on how do we keep this alive in the longer term, because we can't just roll it out to our staff and then stop talking about it. So in the strategy we talked about clarifying and communicating, and to keep doing it, and not just with new staff but with our existing staff. So we sort of keep it alive and it becomes part of the discourse, the internal discourse. And so your thoughts also on that would be much appreciated.
Any immediate questions for Francis? And then we're going to go into an exercise to discuss the questions that Francis has asked you. Have you got any immediate questions about the rollout plan which is outlined? Okay. Sorry.
One question that reflected to me over the break, and I know, Francis, you're feeding back to Louise on sort of immediate thoughts and reactions from the room today. The point was that there's a sort of equivalent sort of senior leader group within the Department of Social Care, the sort of Justin Ridden-Jones, the Beth Allens, the Kate Pattersons, Sam Brown, that broader space. And have you got any? I didn't know the answer.
Yeah, no, it's a really good. Yes,
how they're going to engage?
It's a really good point, because the gap, I think we need to build it in. How's that going to happen? How does that piece take place?
Elaine Williams here. if we want to work in a model of co-production with colleagues within SRE to deliver this strategy, I think it is so essential that we really bring them along with this. Otherwise, there's a risk of duplication and not a very sort of joined up approach, particularly to our external stakeholders. And so I just think that using this strategy as the hook to do that, I think could be really quite helpful.
And do you think that, is that just a meeting hosted by Louise with them? Or is that, when you talk about co-production, I mean, you may come up, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but your thoughts as to how we do that in a way that would lead to co-production as opposed to just them being updated?
It's difficult because I think on our tables we have the 5 work streams, and lots of ideas have come up from that, and I'm sure that they would have equivalent ideas, because if we're going to take some of those ideas forward to implement the strategy, we need to bring them along, bring them alongside us to deliver that. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a rerun of today, but there has to be some, I don't know, it's a way, some sort of mechanism. And also I think for people within this room to meet some of those people, I think there's opportunities for colleagues here in the centres to link up with colleagues in SRE, and also some of us will see that even within SRE they're very busy, that sometimes somebody over here is working on something, don't necessarily know that colleague over, and I just think that potentially there's opportunity. I don't think we won't solve it entirely, but I just think that we should try and do something.
And one thing we're working on, which is sort of linked to this, they're not the same thing, is to do a kind of induction for SRE, a joint programme of work, to do an induction for coordinating centre staff and SRE staff. And the idea there is that when you first join, if you're new in your job, you get a sort of module that tells you what the NIHR is. But then maybe there's webinars through the year or something, and we could think about linking them to the 5 work streams or whatever we're calling them. And then there's, of course, the ambitions and the operating principles. So how we divide that up, but as being a joint enterprise there. So that would be good.
I think that one thing I got from the group discussion earlier, and I think this came up on every table, is that there was kind of, not everybody knew enough about what everyone else was doing. And I wonder if that's a piece of work that needs to happen in conjunction with communicating this to coordinating centre staff. Because otherwise, there's a danger that you're communicating something that people aren't going to fully appreciate or understand.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And that's just, if you can sort of unpack that in your group, because you're absolutely right. There's words, and then there's kind of the understanding that's required.
The meaning. Yeah,
that would be brilliant.